Good morning and welcome to Getting Live Detox by Getty. I am Zaina Molai, your host for the live talk today, and I am a Getty trainer. I welcome you all to this talk and I welcome my speaker for today, Mr. Michael Stevens Navarro. A very warm welcome to you, sir. So first, let me tell you about a bit about my organization. So Global Education Training Institute is one of the most premium training institutes of the country, and we provide two types of training. One for the teachers who are already in service, that is in-service training program, and another for the aspiring teachers who want to become outstanding teachers, the pre-service training program. Thirdly, we have this forum where we host the live talks by the name of Detox by Katie, and we provide this platform to the educators, edupreneurs, and education leaders from around the world to come to our platform and discuss their innovative ideas. Till date, we have hosted around 1,000 talks, and we are counting many more to come. We are driven by the broad vision of our founder director, Dr. Sunita Gandhi, to disrupt education. So, without wasting any more time, I would like to welcome Mr. Michael. Mr. Michael is a passionate language teacher who believes education should be universal and accessible to everyone. He has created innovative platforms like Scaffolding, Disruptive, Scaffolding, and he is currently teaching adults and teenagers in a prestigious institute based in the USA. Michael regularly conducts training online via webinars and also helps educators embrace technology in their lessons. A very warm welcome to you, Michael. And today, Michael will be speaking on a very interesting topic: how to spice up your English lessons in an online environment. What an interesting topic, and I hope my fellow teachers are looking forward to listen from you from this on this topic. So without much ado, I would like to invite you, sir, and please start your session.
Okay. Thank you so much, Simon. Thanks for such a lovely introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. And, it's good to be surrounded by good communities who support trainers, and who allow other teachers to share their expertise with other colleagues. And it's my honor, to share my training session. So let's begin. Let's go. Let me just share my PPT slides. Mhm. Let's see.
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay, fantastic. So, mhm, yes. So let's begin. Great. By the way, are my PPT slides visible? Can you all see the
Yes,
screen?
yes. I
Yes,
can see
right?
your ask your teacher. Is your slide which is open? Ask your
Yes.
teacher.
Excellent. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Yeah.
Great. So, in this case, when I start my session, just to liven up my session in this case, I like to start with feeling scales. Now, what is a feeling scale? A feeling scale is basically a picture, right? Or in this case, different pictures that expresses different pictures that express different feelings and emotions, right? So you ask your students, how are they doing? How are they feeling today? And they have to select one of the pictures that are here. One of the pictures that represent their emotions. Yes. For example, in my case, teachers, I feel like picture letter A. I am really excited, to share my topic. So that's why I chose that picture. And in the same way, you ask your students to do the same. You give them some thinking time, yes, and they have to choose one of the pictures that are here, yes, so that they can tell you more about the feelings, and more about how they are feeling today, right? Remember that one of the principles, at least this is something that I always consider, is to ask your students how they are doing. Sometimes we don't know what things they are going through, so it's important to ask this basic question: right? And with this simple question, you can create a dialogue, yes, and you create a welcoming atmosphere, because if you're asking this question, it means that you want to know how your students are feeling today. Now, when we start a course, when we start a course, something that I always do is to ask questions to my students, especially if they don't know me, right? In my teaching context, if I am teaching level 1, I continue with those students, with the upcoming levels. But in some cases, sometimes you have new groups. So it's a good way, to do, uh, in this case, a getting to know you activity, yes, so that you can establish rapport with your students. This is a simple one. We as teachers always ask questions to our students, but it's also important to allow students to ask their teachers questions. That's why we have one activity called Ask Your Teacher. So let me read the instructions for you. It says, it's time to put your teacher in the hot seat. With your partner, think of 3 questions you'd like to ask your teacher. Then see what answers your teacher has for you. So instead of putting the students on the spot, the students have to come up with different questions, and sometimes they get so creative, right? And they ask you questions, and you have to answer them. And by doing so, you are building bonds with your students. For example, a few months ago, I did the same activity with my students, and they asked me questions like, "Oh, how long have you been teaching?" Right? "Oh, where are you from?" Mhm. And other kind of questions. Now, try to promote WH questions, because WH questions allow, in this case, allow the teacher to expand their answers and allow students to formulate better questions, right? Like, why did you become a teacher? Where do you live? Why did you decide to become a teacher? That's a common question that I always get asked. And so on. The list goes on. So this is a good way to start your class. Remember, this is like an icebreaker. You're trying to get to know your teacher. Now, in this case, what I want you to do is this. We're going to focus on the learning objectives that we have today. As in this case, as we said before, this session is titled How to Spice Up Your Online Lessons. So what other activities can I do? Can I implement in my online classes just to make my classes more interactive, more engaging? So let me read the learning outcomes. Let's go through our agenda. By the end of the session, teachers will be able to apply different warm-ups and icebreakers into a digital teaching context. Now, these activities, let me just point out that these activities will also be effective uh, in case you are teaching face-to-face. At least in my context, many teachers are about to teach in-person classes. But in case you're also teaching remotely, these activities will also work effectively. Now, by the end of the session, teachers will also be able to acquire different strategies and practical ideas that will allow them to enhance student engagement. So let's begin. Let's see what other activities we can do. Now, I would like to tell you in this case a story. I love stories, and I'm sure your students also do. Now, in this case, we have a question. It says, what would you do if you were me? Let me tell you a story. In this case, I used to have one student. Yes. Her name is Sophia. And Sophia was, was a great student. She was always responsible. Every time I used to teach her face to face. But when we transitioned, and when I transitioned from remote teaching to face to face classes, I noticed something different. Sophia was not the same. She was not even attending online classes. She was not actually engaged with the content. Every time, um, or in this case, every time I was trying to call Sophia so that she can give me her opinion, she was just giving me short answers. Mhm. I could notice that because of her body language. She was doing this position all the time. Sophia was not even doing her homework, and she was constantly multitasking during her lessons. So let's try to make it interactive. What would you do if you were me? What activities would you do? What would you do differently if you were me? Let me ask you this hypothetical situation, right? What would you do if you were me? What would you do differently? What activities would you include? So I'm gonna give you, some seconds so that you can think about it, because I know this is a common problem. Yes? So think about it. What would you do if you were me? You can, write your answers in the chat box, right? Or in the comment section, right? Remember that we need to make this training session as interactive as possible. Yes? Great. Very good. So think about that. While you're thinking, let me tell you that what I did in this case, after I got some experience teaching online, I decided to change or to adapt my lessons. In other words, I try to modify my lessons. I try to include more interactive activities. I started to do more research. I started to think about the beginning of my lesson and how I was concluding my lesson, and if my activities were purposeful. Mhm. And I decided to do a needs analysis. I decided to ask questions to get to know my student deeply, right? Simple questions like, what do you do in your free time? What kind of music do you listen to? Mhm. Or in this case, how are you dealing with the current situation? By asking those simple questions, I was collecting data. And according to that information, I took some action. And I came to the conclusion that what my student actually had was, in this case, she was going through a lot of things because of the pandemic. And sometimes we don't even realize about it. So I had to support my student emotionally. I had one-to-one, in this case, class with her. I talked to her privately, and I could really understand the situation. And I became more understanding. I became more diplomatic as well, because I know my student was not feeling mentally healthy. So I had to be diplomatic and empathetic with her. And I decided to include more activities. As we said before, when you want to know your students, you have to include icebreakers, such as this one, show and tell. A simple activity like this. We have the instructions here, so listen carefully. This is one activity that I tried and I did in my class. It says, I start off by asking my students, what does meaningful mean? I always ask my students this question. Once they get familiar with the word meaningful, I ask them to find an object that is meaningful to them. So I tell my students, hey, stand up, and I want you to find an object that is important, that is meaningful, valuable. And in this case, the object that they show to the cameras Can be anything. It can be a toy. It can even be a painting, a drawing, or even a technological device. And I realized that some of my students are into painting, as you can see in the first picture. I didn't know this until I did this activity. I understood that, and I learned that my student was, and is actually, she is an avid um, painter. She told me that she always paint and draw new things. And I didn't know that. And she shared it in this case, as you can see here in the first photograph. She shared one of her paintings with us. She did that by herself. Below, you can see a drawing. Actually, this student was showing us a drawing that her son did. And she was really proud because, she's a mom and moms usually brag about their kids. So she was feeling really proud about it. But before you do that, remember that you have to model it, right? So you, as a teacher, you have to model it first. So what I did was I took my meaningful object and I showed my object to the camera. And they had a clear understanding of how the activity works. Now, you might be wondering, but teacher, does this activity work, or does this activity only work for intermediate or advanced students? And the answer is no. You can actually use this activity with different levels. I applied this activity with elementary, intermediate, and advanced students. Now, if you have an elementary student, you can do scaffolding, sentence stems. So I always provide my students with sentence stems so that they can organize their thoughts and they can speak up. They can share their ideas confidently. And this is what I did. I gave them some sentence stems like, I want to talk about my object is important because, and they had to justify their opinion. Or my object is, and they had to use some adjectives to describe their objects. Yes. So let's imagine that my favorite object is my cell phone. So I can say, I want to talk about my cell phone. My cell phone is important because I can communicate with my family. My cell phone is technological, is big, is expensive, inexpensive, economical, and so on, right? But you have to model it first. Once the students get a clear idea of how this activity works, you can ask for volunteers. This is one activity. It's called show and tell. But what else can I do in my English lessons? Another activity that I like doing is 3 facts and 1 lie. I love this activity. And let me know in the comment section, have you ever applied this activity? 3 facts and 1 lie. Have you ever done it? Let's see. Let me show you. 3 facts and 1 lie. Now, you can do this in your PPT slides, or you can use a different digital tool. In my case, I'm a tech savvy. I love technology, and I found the website Padlet. But hey, it's not necessary to have a Padlet account to do this activity. As I said before, you can do it using PPT slides. So let me show you what this activity is about. As I said, it's called 3 facts and 1 lie. So as the title suggests, you are going to show to the students 4 sentences, right? You have to tell the students 3 of these sentences are true about myself. And there is 1 sentence that is a lie. What is a lie? Teacher, a lie is when something is not true. You got it? Uh-huh. So my students have to read the sentences individually. They have the 4 sentences here. And they have to tell me which of these sentences is the false one. And why? That is the most important question. Why? Because if you ask that question, why do you think that? You're going to allow the student to expand their ideas and to justify their opinions. So you have the 4 sentences, like I studied administration before becoming an English teacher. I delivered a training session to 600 teachers. I will go to the US next year. Or I speak 3 languages. So you have to give your students some thinking time to read the sentences and then to decide which of these sentences is not true. So can we do the same? In the comment section, which of these sentences do you think is not true? Is it number 1? Is it number 2, 3, or 4? Now, if you don't see the sentences, let me read the sentences for you. Let me zoom in a little bit. Yes. Okay, much better. So we have, I studied administration before becoming an English teacher. What do you think about it? True, false? I delivered a training session to 600 teachers. True or false? I will go to the US next year. Who knows? Fingers crossed. Or finally, I speak 3 languages. So think about it, teachers. Can you tell me, please, in the chat box or in the comment section? Let's see. I can see Wilder. Wilder said, hey, you don't speak 3 languages. And that's completely true. I don't speak 3 languages, right? Very good, Wilder. You got it right. So you see, and then you have to ask why. Why do you think that? So that's it. That's how the activity works. Great. Yes, and in the same way you ask the others. Before you give them the final answer, you ask the other students to do the same. Great. Very good. Let's see. Let's move on. Okay. Now we have an interesting topic here. It says silence in the virtual classroom. Ooh. I know teachers feel scared when we hear the word silence or when we experience silence in the virtual classroom. But believe it or not, I've learned a lot from it. My question is simple. Why do students go silent? Why do they do it? Why do students go silent? Can you maybe add some ideas in the comment section below? Why do you think they go silent? I will read your comments. So, why do you think? Let's see. I'm gonna give you some ideas. Let's see. There are some of the reasons why students do not want to participate. Maybe students are distracted. Maybe they are multitasking. Maybe they feel confused. Maybe they are not interested in the discussion. Maybe they feel bored, or they simply don't understand. Or perhaps you haven't given to your students some thinking time, which is important. Sometimes we want fast answers. We expect students to answer our questions quickly. But hey, students also need to structure their thoughts. You need to give them some thinking time. Yes? So before doing this, it's important to, in this case, it's important to analyze, to reflect on these points that we have here. Yes? Now, my students are distracted. Why are they distracted? my students didn't do the activity properly? Was it because my instructions were not clear? So think about that. It's about reflecting on those problems. And once you do that, you will find the answers. I love these phrases that I use when my students have their cameras off. That is another issue that we often face. Now, instead of saying, hey, why don't you turn on your camera, or turn on your camera now? Instead of saying that, why not use this structure or this phrase? Let's imagine that I have one student called Mike. So I can say, hey, Mike, I noticed your camera is off today. Is everything okay? Let me know if I can help. Or, I know you can't have your camera on today, so I'm grateful to see your thoughts and ideas in the chat. I'm fully sure these phrases sound more diplomatic than the ones that we often use. And it's great to see the results, because I did this. And students, in this case, what students did was to speak up, to open up. They told me their problems. Instead of telling, hey, or instead of saying, hey, turn on your camera now, if you use this phrase, you are building rapport with your students, because they can tell you what the problem is. And sometimes the reasons can be different. Sometimes they feel bad. Maybe they had a bad day at work, or maybe some of the relatives passed away. And that also happens because it's the new reality. And we have to be understanding when these problems arise. Great. So let's see. We have this. What makes an activity effective? Because we need to think about it. What makes an activity effective? Number one, personalization. Always. If you design an activity, or if an activity is successful, the main reason is that you are meeting your students' needs. You know what your students want. You know where your students come from. So you want to personalize it. You ask the right questions because you know that student effectively. What else? Relevancy. Is the activity connected to the learning outcomes? And I'm doing the activity just for fun, or because I want my students to get out something of it, or to get something out of the activity. Choice. We also need to give choices to our students. Sometimes there are activities that our students want to try. So just by asking them, what did you like about my lesson? Or what was your favorite part of the lesson? You know what your students want, and you can take that feedback into account. For example, my students love the icebreakers that I showed you previously, and they told me, teacher, that was my favorite activity. So, that information allows me to recycle that activity with other groups. Active listening, always. You have to listen actively to your students, and your students have to listen actively to their peers. Remember, it's about creating a supportive atmosphere, right? You want your students to feel comfortable. Your students shouldn't feel threatened in class. You want to create a welcoming and friendly atmosphere. Clear objectives. We said this before, right? There is a purpose. Our activities should be purposeful. Great. So, something that we have to consider, warm-ups. Yes, as we said before, and I know you're familiar with this concept. A warm-up is basically a preparatory stage. You want students to feel relaxed and you want students to think in English, right? Now, warm-ups are not long activities. They are usually short activities. And these activities are carried out at the beginning of a lesson. Warm-ups are basically different types of activities, which help the students begin to think in English, right? So let me show you some warm-ups that I love using. Let me show you. I have some activities here. Let's see. Give me a second. Okay. I love this one. This is my favorite. It says, how do you know that person? So we all have a phone. We all have a phone here. So what you can do with your students is this. You tell your students, hey, what is this? Oh, teacher, this is a phone. So you elicit the word phone, right? And then, in this case, what you do is this. You ask your students, so in your phone, you have a contact list, right? Yes, teacher, we all have a contact list. So what I want you to do is to find a person whose name starts with the letter, and we're going to see the letter. We have the letter O. So you ask your students to find a person whose name starts with the letter O. Once they find that person, they have to type the name of that person in the chat box. And you can ask your students, how do they know that person? And they have to tell you, right? So it's an effective way, to liven up your lessons a little bit, right? You're using a roulette in this case, and it's a personalized activity. Now, is it relevant? It is, because you're trying to build bonds with your students. And also, you can also use it in case you want to practice spelling. I always tell my students, and how do you spell that name? So you can also, or your students can also practice spelling, or WH questions. And how do you know that person? When did you meet her, or when did you meet him? When was the last time that you saw that person, right? And so on. Yes. You can even ask your students to create some WH questions for their peers. Yes. So there are many ways on how you can adapt this activity. So it's a great activity that I love using in my classes, for example. Yes. Great. Very good. And just to finish, let me show you some other activities that I have. Let's see. Talking about quarantine, it says choose your quarantine house. House 1, house 2, house 3, house 4, house 5. And in this case, my purpose was to practice conditionals in a subtle way. I was not actually teaching conditionals, but my students had to use a conditional structure to tell me their answers. And the question was this: if you had to choose one of these houses, which one would you pick? And they have options, choices. It's personalized because I know that my students love social media. They like Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook. Is it relevant? Of course it is. I was about to teach conditionals. It's connected to the topic. So I gave to my students some thinking time to choose their answers. So what about you? Can you please choose one of the houses that is here? In the comment section. Can you do so? Let me know, please. Okay, great, fantastic. So let's see. For example, in my case, and actually the most popular answer here is the first one, house one. And why? Because most of my students love this TV show. It's called Friends. So most of my students always choose house number one. And they love fries, they love cupcakes, and also their favorite social site is Instagram, right? And there are others, for example, who love Game of Thrones. They are big fans of that TV show. They love chocolates. Even though they are not big fans of Facebook, they choose House 3 because of that TV show. So you see, there are many answers, and it allows your students, this activity allows your students to tell you more about their favorite TV shows, to tell you if they like social media, and what food they are keen on, right? So it's a great opportunity to get to know them a bit more. And this is basically what I have learned during these COVID times. Yes. I learned how to personalize my classes. I learned how to make my activities more focused and related, to my learning outcomes. So just to finish, just to reflect on our teaching practice, I would like to show you this. I would like to share with you one quote that I love. It says, "We do not learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience." I love this quote. And remember, sometimes teachers think that their classes will be successful as long as they use sophisticated tools. And it doesn't work that way. I used to think that as well. I used to think that if I have my PPT slides ready, I was able, to deliver the best class ever. But it doesn't work that way. We have to reflect. And I always carry a teaching journal with me. This is my teaching journal. And this journal allows me to reflect on my teaching practice. And thanks to my reflections, thanks to my journal, I'm a better teacher every day. And I strongly suggest doing the same. I strongly suggest, in this case, grabbing a piece of paper where you can write all your thoughts. Maybe this activity was good. I can recycle it. I can use that activity in my other class. Or maybe this activity didn't work as I expected. How can I improve it? How can I get better? So remember that it's not about how many tools we use. It's about how effective and fruitful we are with them. Yes? And I would like to give you some questions. As you can see, you don't have to answer these questions now, but maybe during the week or during the weekend, you can answer those questions in your mind, or maybe you can just simply write your thoughts in your teaching journal. And in case you don't have a teaching journal, hey, you can just grab a piece of paper and take notes every single day, and you will see the improvement. There is always room for improvement. So let me ask you these questions. What did you take away from this session? How can these activities benefit your students? What other activities or strategies do you use to keep your students engaged? And the extra question is, how can I grow as a teacher? Yes. So if you ask yourself those questions, that will be good or beneficial. Yes. for your professional development, yes, or for your personal development as well, to become a better human being, yes. Mm-hmm. And don't forget, you don't have to pay expensive courses just for your professional development. We have amazing communities such as this one, where teachers from all around the world share their thoughts and ideas with others for free. There are other communities as well, videos, yes, free courses that, I mean, where you can have access to new information. So all I want to say is thank you. Thank you so much. Give yourself a pat on the back because you deserve it. You've done a good job, an amazing job. And as I said before, a teacher is someone who lives their job, a people person, an exceptional listener, an eternal student, a facilitator of learning, an experimenter, someone who can meet challenges, someone who has empathy for his students, someone who enjoys discovering new things, a coach, and the list goes on. Because we do so many things, we play different roles in this job, and I love it. So thank you so much. And as I said before, I really appreciate it. Yes. And take, my piece of advice into consideration. Okay. I mean, here in Peru it's almost midnight. But yes, I just want to say, thank you so much. It's Friday. Yes. So take my suggestions into account. And if you have some questions, please feel free to leave those questions in the comment section. I will be happy to answer them. Yes. Okay. Mhm. Oh, okay. Sign up. You're on mute. Yes. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you so much, Michael, for such an amazing session. I was all through jotting down the points which you stated, like how can I spice up my lessons, and this is not only for English. This can be applicable for other subjects as well, right? You have to be emotionally connected to your students, then only you can teach them, and that too in an online scenario where you are not in a close contact with the students. So your students need to feel that they are connected to you and they have this relation with you, no matter they are away from you. And very good thing that you have told in the end, teacher reflection diary. You don't need expensive course to improve upon your knowledge and your skills. You need to reflect upon yourself, how good you are doing, was your lesson worth it, or what children are gaining from this particular activity, or and so on. So if you daily write your diary and reflect upon the things that you have done all through the day while teaching your students, I hope you improve upon yourself. And I am making a note of it that I note these things in my diary and reflect upon my things. So I would like to request my audience, if they have any question, please post it in the comment section. And I have one question from you. So as of now, we are having hybrid classes. 3 days students are coming to the class, and 3 days they are doing their online classes. So in this way, how can you stay connected to students? As you gave an example of your student Sophie, who was very good in the physical setup, but when you went online, she's uh, took a back seat and was not that attentive or paying giving responses in a very nice manner. So what do you recommend for such a students who is behaving like this in a hybrid system?
Okay. Yes. I think one of the most important things is to have or to show to the students the classroom boundaries. When we start a class, we have to think about what our students are supposed to do in class and when they are not supposed to do in class, and to respect those classroom boundaries. I have one strategy which is called the classroom contract, in which basically in the first day of class, basically the first day of class, I show to my students, the things that they should do. Yes, even if I am teaching them remotely or face to face, I still show them, right? And they all agree with the policies that we have, right? Um, you know, the policies are like basically, turn on your microphone when needed, always raise your hand when you want to participate, turn taking skills, respect, your partner's opinion, and and so on. And they respect, that classroom contract because we all agree with it. I use in this case Padlet, which is another website where students can sign, that contract, and every time they don't follow the rules that we established before, I remind my students that they have signed the contract so that, they can feel like, oh, I have to do this, or I need to follow that rule because I signed it, right? And it actually works pretty well. And another thing as well that I would do is to do the needs analysis. As I said before, it all comes down to getting to know your students, and just by asking some simple questions, just by personalizing your lessons, you will make your classes more effective, right? So yes, that would be my piece of advice. Mhm.
Thank you so much for your advice. And by this, we come to an end of our session. Would you like to say anything else, Michael?
Oh yes, of course. Yes, as I said, or as I stated before, teachers just continue doing all the hard work. I know you. Um, we've all gone through, bad days as well, good bad days, but we are there, right? Just never stop learning. That would be my piece of advice, because there is always something new to learn. Every single day I prepare, my my I take some notes on what things I can learn, not necessarily related to teaching, but maybe some other skills like learning and how to play a new instrument, or maybe doing like a bucket list of all the things that you would like to do in the future, and the things or the skills that you learn can also contribute or can allow you to talk about good things in your classes, right? So for example, I learned how to play the guitar. Well, I'm still learning, and I did that with my students. I brought my guitar and I played, the guitar in front of them, and they were like, "Wow, teacher, you learned how to play the guitar." Yes, because I'm a lifelong learner, and I want the same for you as well, right? To continue learning, to continue reflecting on your practice. Yes, and well, just to finish, I also have in this case a community called English with Michael. I also give free training sessions as well. Yes, where we share teaching ideas. I also like to share all the activities that you've seen today. I also like to share them, in other communities, and also in English with Michael, which is the community I have. So if you want to support us, or if you want to know more about it, yes, you can follow us on Facebook as well. Yes, so thank you. Mhm.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank you, Michael, and thank my dear audience who have been with us all through. They all are praising from you. There are people from Sri Lanka and from your native place. They are feeling. They're saying that your session is terrific. So we come to an end of our session. I would say a good night to you and a lovely day ahead to all other people who are in the other part of the world. So
Mhm.
thank you and bye bye. Hope to see
Bye
you again on our channel.
bye. Bye. Take care,
Bye bye.
everybody. Bye bye.
You too.
See
Take
you.
care.